Well, and you know, you talked about people getting involved. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got voter apathy out there. It's an election year. Get out there and vote. And there's been a turnout, you know, and the judges in Dallas, there was a turnabout there of some more Democratic judges. I'm not saying necessarily that they're not as conservative as, but as a general rule, you get a little bit more middle of the road if you get a Democrat judge in there. Dallas did it. And I'm asking people to log on to peopleoverprofits.org. That's going to appear in front of your screen. You can click on there and you find out who your rep is, you find out who your United States Senator is, and you send them letters. And I've gone up to Washington, D.C. and argued for doctors as well as poor people. And you know what one legislator told me? He said, we pay more attention to a little old lady's handwritten letter than some form letter printed off a computer. And that'll get more attention. And I say, well, flood them with handwritten letters. You know, and I bet you if more Christians out there get on this and see that it's not right, that people are suffering. You know, our Savior said that, you know, the less of you, the poorest of you, if you help that brother, you're helping me. And that's not happening in this country.
No, and Christians especially ought to be doing it for another reason. You know, Jesus told the parable about the talents. And talent was a form of money back then. It wasn't talent in the sense that we think of a gift. But the idea was that a man had money and he entrusted some of that money to 3 of his servants. Those servants were supposed to invest that money and use it wisely till the man returned. The servants, 2 of them invested it and used it wisely. 1 did not. 1 just hid the money and kept it safe, but didn't invest it and use it wisely. And Jesus took it from, said the man took the money from that unwise servant and untrustworthy servant and gave it to the others and brought retribution on the servant. Here's the moral to it. When you've been given something from God that you have stewardship and responsibility over, as Christians, we believe that you're supposed to exercise and use that wisely. God doesn't give us stuff to squander. God doesn't give us stuff to waste, and He doesn't give us stuff to sit on. He gives us stuff to use, okay? Now, every American who can vote, every person, every U.S. citizen over the age of 18 that hadn't committed a felony and been convicted for the felony, that has the right to vote, ought to do it. And some people say, well, 1 vote won't make a difference. No, it's not a question of does it make a difference. It's a question of are you using wisely what God has put into your life to use. You've got a vote to use. Every Christian ought to be out there registered to vote. And you've got time to register to vote for this upcoming election. You absolutely have time. And I'll go you one further. You not only have time, you have influence. You can go out and find a family, 5 or 6 people who vote. You can go find more. Get them registered. Get them registered to vote and then vote. It makes all the difference in the world. We have more people in Texas not voting than we have voting. We should turn that around. We've got to do something in this state. Texas ranks so near the bottom in providing insurance for our children. Our health insurance for our children is pathetic. Our education system in Texas is horrible right now. And so my question is, will you go to Austin and you go knocking on those doors of those legislatures and you, or better yet, why don't you send your lobbyist? You're listening to me. Send your full-time lobbyist. Oh, you don't have one? Of course you don't, but the businesses do. They're in there with full-time lobbyists, taking those senators and representatives to lunch and dinner and wining and dining and making their case. Now, we've got some wonderful state reps and senators. I've got some good friends who are in that system. But they'll even tell you that they get wined and dined by lobbyists, but the average person doesn't have a lobbyist. All you got's your vote. And you need to be registered, you need to be voting, and you need to take as many people as you can. I implore you, it's the right thing to do.
Well, and you're looking at politics because, not just because it's an election year, it's the right thing to do. Ladies and gentlemen, as Mr. Lanier said out here, that it is imperative you get out the vote because you can't complain later. When this House Bill 4 passed here in Texas, people thought it was about saving doctors and keeping insurance rates down. there was an agenda behind that, ladies and gentlemen. There was an agenda that said we are going to limit people's rights to sue. And even many of my physician friends who I represent, and they're good friends of mine, said, I have not seen significant drops in my insurance. Rather, some insurances have even gone up. It's harder to practice medicine. The insurance companies pay less and less, and I've got to work twice as hard. I don't have enough time to see my patients. Patients aren't being cared for. There's not enough staffing because the nursing homes and the hospitals are putting profits over people. And that is the bottom line. And I may be chastised for this, but it's the truth. I've been in there. And as Mr. Lanier said, if we don't, that's right, most people don't have a lobbyist, but they do. And I've talked also to a lot of our legislators, and they say the same thing. And what's also offensive is when these legislators get off being there in the Capitol and turn into lobbyists themselves. And then they work for pharmaceutical companies, for all these big businesses. I mean, how are we going to stop this if we are closing the courthouse doors? And this is not just a gripe session, Mark. I came over here, what I really wanted to ask was, how do you see in the foreseeable future, we've got an aging population, our corporations are powerful. How do you see, the foreseeable future, 5, 10 years down the road? What do you anticipate as far as litigation and people's rights in court?
Well, if everybody get out and vote, things could turn around dramatically. But right now, the situation here in Texas is not a pleasant one. And the courthouse doors are getting smaller and smaller, and the courthouse hallways narrower and narrower. And you're going to find it to be a place for the rich. You're going to find it to be a place for the powerful. And you're going to find that the poor, the less fortunate, more and more are not able to go in there and get any type of justice whatsoever. I wish I had a more positive outlook. Right now, with the climate we have in Texas, there are hints that it may turn around. It'll be interesting to see what happens in this election cycle. Certainly we saw some changes in Dallas where the people last election cycle got very upset, and they voted in just almost an entire whole new set of judges because they were so frustrated with the lack of justice. But it's got to go deeper than that. We've got to find justice in the halls of Austin. We've got to get them in the appellate courts. We've got to get them on the Supreme Court. We've got to get it in with our House of Representatives and with our state Senate. We've got to get the governor to care about the small people as well as the big people. We got to get them to care about the downtrodden as well as the folks that'll spend enough money to take him golfing at some wonderful resort.
Well, and a lot of people out there still scratch their head and say, well, our trial lawyers, the villain that the big business and the media and many special interest groups try to make us to be. Now, other people have said, and come on my show, defense lawyers and stuff, and said, oh, come on, Joe, some of the lawyers out there who really advertise and overkill and do this, the reputation is richly deserved. And how do you respond to that, saying some lawyers bring it on themselves? And that is why they've alienated themselves from the voters. They've alienated themselves from the conservative faction and church-going people.
Well, that's true. First, I've got to admit it. There are some lawyers that are bad eggs that give a bad name. There are some doctors that are absolutely horrible doctors who chop off the wrong leg during surgery or do surgery while they're high on cocaine or something like that. But I've never seen anybody say, because there are a few of these doctors out there that are bad, we need to shut down the hospitals. And we shouldn't be having doctors. We need to get rid of doctors. And man, every doctor must be a cocaine freak, or every doctor must not know their right from their left and chop off the wrong leg during surgery. That doesn't happen. Just because you can find a bad lawyer or two or three or four doesn't mean that you get rid of the court system. America is built on checks and balances. We need the court system. It means if you've got a bad lawyer, get rid of that lawyer. If you've got a bad doctor, you get rid of that doctor. Just because we have President Richard Nixon resigned from the White House because it looked like he was going to get impeached because he had some really bad problems criminally with Watergate. Ultimately, the next president had to issue a pardon for him. But that doesn't mean, well, we're going to do away with the presidency and we're not going to have presidents anymore, because it turns out we had one that it looks like he may not have been so honest.